says one thing. Tony Messenger,
His theme song.
St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist and contributor to the Big 550 KTRS every Tuesday and Thursday. Good morning, Tony Messenger.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Hi, Tony.
So I'm dying to talk to you and to get your comments and your thoughts on your colleagues' reporting on this Franks-Hubbard machine absentee ballot scandal controversy that's going on in the city of St. Louis.
First of all, from a journalism standpoint, it gave me great pride to see my colleagues Stephen Deere and Doug Moore put together, a really deeply reported, well-written piece that just really lays out why we have a trial going on this week over a House election in the 78th district in the city of St. Louis. It was there are clearly issues in both how the election board handles absentee ballots, how the Hubbard family went about obtaining absentee votes, and those issues are on trial this week. I spent a little time in the courtroom yesterday and plan on writing about it in my column tomorrow. Regardless of what happens in the trial, whether there's a new election, whether we now know there's a grand jury investigation, a couple of things will clearly happen or need to happen. One, there needs to be some changes to the absentee law because it hasn't caught up with technology, and because clearly at least one election board here in the city is confused over how to deal with the absentee law and isn't following it. And two, there's going to be, and this is really what I'm going to be writing about, there's going to be repercussions within the Democratic Party sort of power structure, because with a wink and a nod, a lot of people have depended on the Hubbards over the years to get them votes, not just to get votes for Penny Hubbard or Tamika Hubbard or Rodney Hubbard Sr. or Rodney Hubbard Jr., but to get them votes. And those chickens are coming home to roost.
Don't you find it a tad offensive that Penny Hubbard's organization is trying to blame the media for voter intimidation while trying to track down the story?
That was ridiculous. I mean, reporters are doing what reporters do, using public information, and nobody's intimidating anybody. Stephen Deere and Doug Moore went door to door using public information, saying, hey, tell us about your voting experience. And you know what? They had every right to tell us about their voting experience or not tell us about their voting experience. And that reporting, combined with the public records that they had, clearly showed that some people are concerned about the voting experience they had as it relates to the absentee process. So the idea that, specifically on Twitter, Jane Duker was going after Stephen Deere, and I was offended by it because Stephen Deere's just doing his job. I understand Jane Duker's representing her clients, and she's representing them aggressively. But to accuse reporters of intimidation in that process is beyond the pale.
Yeah, there's no question about it. She's a KMOX radio personality, Jane Duker, also, I guess, working for the Penny Hubbard machine, vigorously defending her client against the allegations. How bad is it, Tony? Because they're trying to say, well, an application for an absentee ballot is different than a ballot. So somebody might get 3 or 4 applications but only vote once. So it's really not as bad as people are saying.
Well, there's an element of it where to Jane's credit and to the Hubbard's credit, one can make an argument that I don't yet know, and I think this is what the judge is going to have to determine. While there are some discrepancies and some problems with how the law was followed, there is not yet a tremendous amount of evidence that there are enough votes that were illegitimate votes that would change, that would be cause for a new election. So, that's going to be a legal matter. But what was clear in testimony yesterday, and what based on my interpretation. It's always a little bit difficult to interpret a judge.
Right.
But based on specific questions that Judge Rex Burleson was asking from the bench and discussing yesterday, he's got a concern that the way the process is run in the city of St. Louis, there is no way to connect an in-person absentee vote with the ultimate result so that that vote may be challenged. One of the keys to our election process is that there is an opportunity for both Republicans and Democrats, usually together when there are election watchers, to see the opening of the absentee ballots, to see the envelope, to question and go back and challenge votes. You know, we go back to Florida and Gore Bush, and there were election watchers there and lawyers galore being able to challenge the record. There was a record. The testimony yesterday is if you vote absentee in the city of St. Louis in person, you go to the election board, you file your vote, either electronically or paper. The paper trail from that point to the election doesn't exist, so that there is no opportunity at the appropriate time to challenge those votes. So that means there's about 160 absentee votes that can't be properly challenged. And my guess, based on what I saw and heard from the judge yesterday, is that he's going to have a problem with that. And that's going to weigh fairly heavily in his mind as he makes a decision.
Is there any precedent? Is there any law? Can this judge throw out this election and then put a new one on the November 3rd ballot?
Yes, he could, and of course there could be multiple appeals, and it may well be the Missouri Supreme Court that decides in a very short period of time if that's allowed. But there have been, we had either a House race, I believe it was a House race in 2 or 3 years ago in St. Louis County that was tossed because of ballot issues in the county, in which people got the wrong ballot. I don't know if you remember, and I forget the House district and the names involved.
Right.
But there was a snafu where people in a district that crosses multiple boundaries got the wrong ballot, and so the votes were just simply invalid. And the judge did invalidate it, and there was a new election. So that is within the power of the courts, and that may happen. And in the meantime, there's a criminal investigation going on, perhaps more than one.
Yeah. Well, when you're reporting, or the Post-Dispatch is reporting of, some 60 some odd ballots showing up without envelopes and all the other nefarious things that were talked about, some pretty unbelievable things went on, only to be discovered by the hard work of some of your colleagues. So pass our thanks on to them, Tony, and we'll be reading you, stltoday.com, and listening to you every Tuesday, Thursday with us. Thanks, Tony. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
All right. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. Really, just brazen. Just truly brazen. Look, there's been a lot of people talking about voter fraud and voter IDs and picture IDs, and me, as well as others, kept saying, hey, look, that's not where the fraud is. The fraud is in the absentee ballot. Just by no one's going to go to the polls. Very few people are going to go to the polls and say I'm Steve when I'm really Bob. Mm-hmm. But if I can fill something out in my house and send it in, or I can just drop off a whole bunch, or everybody looks the other way, that's where there's just so many ways where it can be, the whole system can be abused.
Checks and balances for that is.
Yeah, and the Democrats rely heavily on absentee ballots, which I understand if you're incapacitated, you should have a right to vote. Everybody should have a right to vote, whether you're homeless or not. You don't have to be a landowner to vote anymore. You don't have to be only a male to vote. Everyone should be. It should be as easy as possible for everybody to vote. And the campaigns sort of manipulate those processes to get their own people out, which I guess is fine. But you got to have a system where there's some checks and balances. And this clearly, if what the voters are saying is true, smells so bad that you can't defend it. And there are some people who are trying to defend it, but they seem pretty ridiculous doing it. 827, Big 550.